First of all, I wanted to share with you that this presentation is for informational purposes only. We are sharing with you this webinar in order to provide you with a background of what's going on in the current market and how we expect the presidential election to unfold. So if you can take this amount of information with the necessary amount of caution, that would be great. Any information related, any information that we discuss here is intended to provide trading or investment advice, is not intended to provide trading or investment advice. Any information relating to past performance of an investment does not necessarily guarantee future performance. Think markets shall not be responsible for any loss that you incur, either directly or indirectly, arising from any investment based on any information in this webinar. Please remember that spread betting and trading CFDs carry significant risks and may not be suitable for all investors. So as you might know, we have generally been actively sharing some information about the upcoming US elections with you over the past several weeks, and we wanted to wrap up this discussion today just before we get into the election. And I'm going to start speaking about what is the current situation in order for you guys to get a grasp of what we expect to happen in the coming hours. So first, if you can see my slide, what are the most important states to watch tonight? Basically, these are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin. According to the current polling averages, Joe Biden is favored to win this election, and as you can see on the right side of the screen, the most closely contested states are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Ohio. So we also expect Pennsylvania to be a very, very close one indeed. And it's a state that some people say is a must-win for Biden if he wants to. We need to be keeping close attention as Pennsylvania starts reporting numbers, because that could be very important to the outcome of the final outcome. So these are the closing times of the polls. With this slide, I want to also warn all of you that we might not get the results from the election tonight unless there is a clear majority in one of the camps. We can see that it's a challenging race, and despite the polls closing between 7 and 8 p.m. US time, the mail-in ballots which have been sent over the past weeks are due, could take some time to arrive, and the processing of these ballots and the final results deadlines, as you can see, we have Arizona and Pennsylvania with 20 days deadlines to announce final results. So unless we have a clear majority, this could mean that the results from the election could drag on for a couple of weeks even. Anyways, so this is just as a warning for you, for all those of you who expect that there will be great volatility one side or the other. That's one scenario, but there could be great volatility in both sides, and in the end, we might end up nowhere. So be wary of that. Next, I wanted to share with you the crucial hours, the crucial time to watch tonight, and some of these some of the results start pouring in around 0 GMT. So basically, the moment these polls close, we're going to start getting the first results, and Florida is one of the most important states to watch. And my colleagues here, Fawad and Carl, can attest as witnesses that this can take some time.
Yeah.
So just a second. Carl, can you hear us?
I think we need to unmute him.
Yeah, I have unmuted him.
How about that?
Can you
hear me now?
Now we can hear.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Great.
So yeah, feel free to join in, guys, on at any point that I'm talking. But just to emphasize this point, there are a couple of states that are a must-win for Trump, and they start reporting fairly early, just after 30 minutes after 12 or after the 0 hour. North Carolina and Ohio are a must-win for Trump. Basically, if he loses any of these two states, the election is pretty much done.
Did you say any of those, or you need to lose both?
Yeah, any of these two states is sufficient. Like it's there is a very small statistical probability that that he can flip Pennsylvania if he loses Ohio. That is practically impossible.
Okay.
So moving
some
on.
Some of these states have already started counting. So Arizona's started counting, Florida started counting. The good news is, I think, for us in terms of getting a result, that as you say, some of the key states like Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, they're all on the East Coast. So, you know, compared to, say, if the key states were on the West Coast. So Arizona is a key one, but most of them are on the East Coast. So we should start to get results earlier. The problem with, say, Pennsylvania is that there's no processing of votes until election day, let alone counting. So there's processing of votes, so sort of getting them out of the envelope, verifying them, and then there's counting. So Pennsylvania will be a late call. We won't get that one on Wednesday, but Arizona should be called Wednesday. Florida should be called Wednesday. And as you say, Biden really just needs to win either Florida or Arizona or North Carolina, and he probably will get it. Trump will need to win all three. So it's up. Trump is up against it here.
Yeah. So next, as you can see, Michigan is quite an important state for Joe Biden, and we'll know that something's wrong with the polls once more if he's losing there. So it's a must. I would say it's a must-win state for Joe Biden, as Texas is for Donald Trump. So Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada are not that important, but they still may play a role in flipping the election. So they are among the key states. Next, I want to show you the the Senate, the key Senate races that might influence the election. These are the South Carolina. Like they're also starting getting called around the same time as the first results from the presidential election. So the Senate races to watch are Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then Alaska, Kansas, and Maine. Alaska and Kansas are not as competitive, but Maine is pretty competitive, currently leaning Democrat. So we'll see if that holds. We also have a race in Michigan, Arizona, and Colorado, which also can and will influence the final outcome of the Senate election and whether the Democrats will be able to capture a majority or at least have a split 50-50, which is, as some of you might know, a tie of 50-50 is split by the vice president who gets a vote.
Yeah, the Senate, Victor, I'll just say the Senate is going to be much tighter, I think, than the presidential race. So there's more work that would need to be done by the Democrats to get a clear majority, so over 51. But yeah, 50-50 may be the most likely scenario there.
Yeah, those are the expectations at least. And in the next slide, I have compiled my personal views, which my co-hosts, dear Carl and Fawad, are very much free to disagree with. So this is a short matrix of what I think could happen if in the different scenarios that we have. So the first scenario is a Trump win and a Republican Senate, which I think will be immediately positive for the dollar, for stocks, and negative for gold. And as I see this scenario also positive for the dollar in the long term, as well as for stocks, while gold is more likely to recover and continue trending higher as it has been over the past couple of years. So a Trump win and a Democratic Senate would also be positive for the dollar because fiscal policy will be very, very difficult for Democrats to push through, and we're going to have a conservative fiscal policy for at least in the first weeks of such an outcome. This would also be negative for stocks, pretty much for the same reason, and I also think that it would negatively impact gold in the immediate term. As you can see, for the long run, that actually is more or less neutral for the dollar or slightly positive, and could be more detrimental to stocks depending on how the pandemic situation evolves, obviously. And it could also be a bit more detrimental to gold. A Biden win, on the other hand, is immediately negative for the dollar within the Republican Senate. Actually, in both cases, a Biden win is immediately negative for the dollar. So you might see a spike lower in the US dollar across the board. However, I think that while stocks, in case of a split between a Biden win and Republican Senate, stocks could go down in the immediate term, while in the case of both Democratic win in the Senate and the White House, stocks would react positively. I also think that gold should react positively in both of these cases, as more fiscal impulse is more likely down the line. And this also translates to my long-term view on gold. While stocks could end up flat under a Republican Senate in the longer term, as monetary policy continues supporting them and they obviously recover. So a Biden win in a Democratic Senate is also, I see, more positive for stocks, but I'm also tilting a flat outcome here, because I also think that a Democratic control of the Senate could be detrimental to stocks over the next couple of months because of their promise to increase corporate tax rates. So we might see a down move after the initial reaction is digested. So be wary of that. And last but not least, the dollar is more likely to go lower under such an outcome over the coming 4 years, really. So next, if Carl wants to take over with some comments on scenario probabilities.
Sure. Yeah. So looking at what where the market is placed right now, so what investors, how they've applied their money ahead of the event, and of course, if investors get what they want, there's a better chance that the market will continue on its current trajectory. Let's call it a longer-term uptrend. Obviously, it's been a short-term downtrend, but longer-term uptrend. If the market doesn't get what it wants, then we may see a more of a sell-off from what we've had over the last couple of weeks. So this is a UBS poll. It was a poll of investors rather than just the average person on the street. It was done sort of middle of last week. So these numbers may have changed, if anything, from some of the polls I've seen more recently. It's probably swinging more towards Biden than Trump. But investors were expecting 55% chance of a blue wave. So in a two-horse race, that's a fairly convincing number. We've got a divided Congress, the Biden presidency divided Congress at 15%. Trump and status quo still pretty high at 28%. And really the market is discounting the probability that the Republicans will have both the presidency and control of the Senate. Hit the next slide. And this is, again, who would investors want more to win? So 54% say Biden and 46% say Trump. So what we're taking away from this is that if Biden does get the presidency and carry the Senate, I think also markets would likely to be more positive than negative. And if Trump wins, and then there's tossing up the control of the Senate, that would be less positive for markets, and that's just based upon this survey. What I think the important thing to remember, though, regardless of who appears to win, if we get a result tomorrow or the next day, the key risk is not who wins, but whether the result is disputed. So that's really what it's all about. So obviously Victor had those different scenarios, and I think they're very, very close. I agree with most of those. But the question becomes, okay, what if we don't know? So we had all these four possible scenarios, but what if we don't know? What if we can't say we've got any of those scenarios for days, for weeks, for months? And we know back in 2000, it dragged out for weeks before the Supreme Court ultimately had to decide the winner of that presidential race. So what does a disputed result mean? Okay, well, it's only going to be a problem if the result is very close. As we suggested before, if Biden gets Florida, counting is already underway in Florida. That should be declared fairly early. Or Arizona, counting is underway. It should be declared fairly early. Or North Carolina, it's going to be very hard for Trump to get in. So I've got a feeling it's going to go that way. I've got a feeling we're going to know very quickly in this circumstance. If it doesn't, if the election is very close in terms of electoral college votes, or disputed validity, and there's very different scenarios under each each possibility. So what is a disputed validity, I should say. Trump has been complaining about the deadline for counting ballots. And mainly this is to do with mail-in votes. So when are the votes postmarked versus when do they arrive? What is the cutoff for counting these votes? And of course, there are a number of Americans, particularly say servicemen and women who are, serving in the military in other parts of the world, who are mailing in their votes, and they certainly would think that their votes deserve to be counted. So there's some issues there. So Trump will probably, if it's close, he will go down this path and try and contest that way. But if it's a blowout, I don't think he will. I think if it's very clear, he's not going to do that. So let's go to the next slide. And we'll look at each of those scenarios. So if it's an electoral college tie, so this is per state, how many, depending on how many votes they get. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but we need to have over 270 as a majority. So if it's 270 each, for example, what do we do versus the legitimacy? So if it's an electoral college tie, that will go to the House for a vote, and the House is controlled by the Democrats. So that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for Biden. And we have two precedents there a little while ago, 1800 and 1824. But the precedents were that the House, which is controlled by the Democrats, would have the vote if it's an electoral college tie. Now, that one's not so bad. The next one is the big problem. So if the legitimacy of the result is disputed, and that's what happened in 2000, so obviously more recent than 1800, and that would go to the Supreme Court. And the circumstance there would be if we couldn't decide the real winner. So, of course, we had those hanging chads down in Florida where the punch cards weren't completely punched. And, there was, obviously it was contended, it went through the courts, eventually made it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, basically, we can't say which chads were in, we can't say which chads had fallen out, we can't determine the real winner, and therefore they gave it to George W. Bush. If we get there, it will be given to Trump because we know that the Senate is 6-3 skewed towards Republicans. But I don't think we're going to get there. But just, for people that are watching, these are the possible scenarios. Okay, so risk. Now, people think that if Biden sweeps, so he gets the presidency and control of the Senate, everybody just assumes that that's a great thing and markets will go up. Pardon me, I've hit my microphone here. It's not the case, and it's far from it. So you can't just assume that Biden gets in and we're going to get a $3 trillion stimulus package, which I'll talk about in the next slide. For that to occur without any opposition from the Republicans, Biden would need to get a 60-40 Senate majority. And Victor, I'd like your opinion on this, but I don't think there's any chance of that at all. It would be many standard deviations. Yeah. So that is, I think we all agree that is not going to happen. Now, the problem with that is if you don't have that 60-40, you are at the will of politicians from the other party, potentially employing a number of delaying tactics. And they can delay a vote almost indefinitely. It's called filibustering, which basically they just keep talking and delaying. So the Republicans probably would be quite bitter after having a one-term president. We haven't had a one-term president for 20 or 30 years, I'd say. And they may want to hold up, and they're at opposite ends of the spectrum as to the amount of stimulus anyway. There is a way the Democrats could get their stimulus measures and tax hikes through, and they would have to go through this budget reconciliation process, which is not a simple process. So if you have a bill that is affecting the budget, and we've got a fiscal year from October 1, so we're already in the new year, if any bill you attempt to pass will increase the federal budget beyond a 10-year horizon, and certainly if you look at Biden's what he wants on the spending side and the tax side, it is a lock. It is definitely going to do that. You can only pass one per year. So Biden wants spending and he wants tax, and you can only do one per year. So you can't do both, and therefore that becomes very hard to do. So the only way Biden really can get this stimulus through is with bipartisan support. And I'm happy to I like to ask my co-hosts as to what they think the chances are of getting bipartisan support out of the US political process.
Those seem quite close to zero.
Yeah. So this is the problem for Biden, even if he sweeps, and this is what's at risk. So this is the last slide for me. And if we can get it through, if politicians wake up post-election and say, hey, you know what, let's do the best thing for the American people and really for the world, and pass, at least 1.5 trillion. I think that's the lower end. But if we can get that through, then I think markets will rally. Anything less than that, I think markets will be disappointed, and the US economy will probably struggle because it needs something like that, especially with COVID cases, surging again. So, putting the tax cuts aside, there's probably it's probably a small negative overall for the US economy in comparison to the plus from the stimulus, but there's a big question mark over how soon that would actually start to hit the economy, and in that gap, in that delay, what's going to happen to employment, company earnings and the like.
All right, Fawad, do you want to take over and indulge us with your presentation?
Sure, it's not much of a presentation. I just want to basically share a few ideas.
Charts.
Charts. And by the way, guys, before I start speaking, if you have any questions, please write it in the questions box in the chat window or whatever. I'm sure one of us will be able to answer any questions you guys have. But I've just shared a chart of the VIX. And if you guys could confirm whether or not you can see my screen, then I can.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So, so far we have, talked about different scenarios and likely market direction based on the different outcomes that Victor and Carl just discussed. What we haven't talked about is how exactly do you trade the outcome of the election, which is obviously very different for different people. But how I want to approach the market is in a non-biased and tactical way. To prepare myself for the outcome of the presidential election. Now, I'm assuming that the results will be known by Wednesday latest. That's a big assumption indeed. But if the outcome of the elections is known by Wednesday, then I have basically what I've done is highlighted the key levels on my charts, created like a F-den scenario, which you will see in a minute. But what I want to say first of all is, while we can speculate how the markets might trade once the election outcome is clear, the truth is no one can know for sure, right? There are just too many variables to take into account, not least the unknown risk profiles of market participants whose actions will ultimately drive the markets in one or the other direction. Indeed, with stocks and US index futures bouncing back today, it could be that the market is already pricing in a potential clean sweep victory for Biden. And so if this outcome turns out to be the case, then we may not see too much further upside. Therefore, even if you have a strong conviction that a certain outcome will be the most likely scenario, the reaction of the markets may surprise you nonetheless. So how do we prepare for such an event? Now, as I mentioned, the way I prepare myself is by marking out some key pivotal levels, both above and below market prices, on the most important asset classes. So I would then create like F-then conditional scenarios. For example, if this level breaks, then I will do X, Y, or Z. Not only that, I would also prepare for false moves. For example, if a key high breaks, but the market failed to hold above that high, then I would create a specific plan to get short, or at least close out my losing long position to minimal cost if that scenario plays out. So to show you exactly what I mean, actually, I want to first talk about the VIX, which you can see in front of you right now. Okay, so the VIX is not very high at around 32, suggesting that investors might be underpricing the risks for a contested outcome. The VIX has broken above the trend line, as you can see right here. So this could be a warning sign that the stock, a warning sign for the stock market bulls that volatility could spike and equities could go down, even if there hasn't been much follow through on the upside so far on the VIX. Remember, it's not all about the elections. Virus-related lockdowns are the most important issue for the markets right now. So just because we may get a market-friendly outcome from the US election, don't assume that this will mean stock markets will go up or indeed down. So just wanted to throw that out there. Now, I'm going to start off by looking at the daily chart of the Nasdaq 100, okay? So I have already drawn a few levels here. The most important line, as far as I'm concerned, is this thick black line, trend line, which has been broken, suggesting that the strong bullish trend is no longer the case. The trend is still bullish, long term, because we have the 200-day moving average rising. The market is still making higher highs and higher lows and whatnot, but the trend is not as strong as it once was, which makes sense because of the lockdowns and obviously uncertainty ahead of the elections. But given that the trend line has broken, there's a possibility that we could see a continuation lower for the Nasdaq. So what I want to do is highlight specific scenarios, how to trade this. Now, as things stand, I think this is bearish, and so we should be looking to fade into rallies or try to get on board on breakdown of key levels until and unless we go back above the short-term bearish trend line. Okay, so if we go back above that, then at that point, I think it makes sense to look for bullish setups again on the Nasdaq. But if I show you the hourly chart, the index has been making lower lows, lower highs. So if we get the outcome of elections tonight, and this is the hourly, okay? Now, assuming that the market will remain above this gray box. But after the outcome of the elections are known, and if we go back below this gray box, then that would be the first sign for me that the bulls are getting into trouble. Okay, because the reason I've marked out this gray box is this was the last down move prior to the latest up move. So if we go below that, we will have created a short-term lower low, right, on this hourly time frame, which is which would be a bearish scenario, obviously, and we could see a move down to price support around 109.60-ish. Now that level is key insofar as the daily is concerned and the high time frames. So far, this level has provided support on at least 2 or 3 occasions. So what I want to see after the outcome of the election is known is, can the Nasdaq get down to this level? And if it does get down to this level, what happens next? So for example, if we go below that and hold below it for a while, for a few hours or so, or a couple of hours, then that could lead to a potential down move towards this black level at 106.80. Now that level, if I go back to the daily chart, is this low here, okay? The reason I've marked that level out is because people who are long this market, some of them will have undoubtedly placed their stops below yesterday's low. Some of them will have placed their stops below the low of this swing low here. So these areas kind of, if you think about in terms of liquidity, these are like pools of liquidity. And with the trend, the short-term trend being bearish, there's a strong case, in my view, that the market will drop and take out those liquidity pools before it does anything else. So if after the elections we go below 106.80, and if the index holds below that level, then we could see the onset for a much sharper drop, possibly to the 38.2 Fib level, or most likely the 200-day moving average, which comes in just above the pre-lockdown high at 97.50-ish. So this area is key. We could see a potential drop there, and then if the market has if the market wants to go higher still, then that's the area it needs to defend in terms of long-term support. So that's the potential bearish scenario I'm watching out for, because across social media, all I come across is that people are expecting a market-friendly outcome regardless of which candidate gets into the White House. It kind of makes sense that because both candidates will increase fiscal spending, but as I said, it's not just about the elections, and it could be that the market has already priced in a favorable outcome insofar as the election is concerned. So don't assume that the market will necessarily go up. It will go up, but it could also go down. So just be prepared for both scenarios. Now, in terms of bullish scenario, obviously, as I mentioned on this chart, if we go back above this short-term bearish trend line, then at that point, you'd have to drop your bearish thoughts. Specifically, we have a couple of levels as well to look at for the 11,200 level, previously support, has turned into resistance. So if we go above that level and hold above it, that would be the first bullish sign that would indicate that the market wants to go higher. Thereafter, there's not a lot of further resistance until the bearish trend line, and then that 11,600 level, which was formerly resistance, turned into support. Price and broke the index rather broke below it, and we haven't gone back above that level. So in terms of the longer term outlook, we need to get above 11,600 for the market to turn bullish once again. I've also prepared a couple of, by the way, if you've got any questions about this market, let me know in the chat window. So far, I can't see any questions. And so far as the forex markets are concerned, I've prepared a couple of scenarios with the euro dollar and the pound dollar. So let's start with both first, with the euro dollar first. Euro dollar has been stuck in a ugly range ahead of the elections. Within this range, we can see that the market has been making lower lows and lower highs. And this area right here is very important because this was previously support that gave way a few days ago, remember? And we're now retesting it, which could then offer some resistance. But insofar as the election is concerned, what I want to see next is, do we go below today's low after the outcome of election is out, or do we hold above this gray area? Okay, so if we were to turn around later on in the day or tomorrow and go below today's low, that would be a bearish development in my view, because today's candle is shaping out to be a rather bullish looking candle, right? It looks like a thrust candle, that has led to a breakout above yesterday's hammer high. So if we were to go back below today's low, that would indicate to me that the buyers who bought today, all of those guys are trapped. And so the market would then go to levels where their stop loss levels will be resting, namely below the September low and possibly much lower than that. So a break below today's earlier low at 1630 is the scenario I'm looking at for the bearish scenario I'm looking at for the euro dollar. And so far as the bullish case is concerned, what I want to see is a daily close above this gray zone. If we see that, then we could see tomorrow, after the outcome of the elections is out, we could see a rise to the top of the channel. But if we get a clean high, a clean break above the most recent high at 118.80, then that would be a longer term bullish development, because we will have had our first higher high and a break above this channel. So that would be the bullish scenario. The cable is very similar to the euro dollar. The reason I'm looking at the cable is because we have the Bank of England meeting as well on Thursday. So once the election is out of the way, then the focus will turn to the Bank of England meeting. Now, the UK lockdown means that the economy is going to suffer, and the Bank of England might do something about it by increasing QE purchases. So that could be something to watch out for on Thursday. But if the dollar rallies after the US election, then what I want to see first and foremost is a break below today's low. So that's the level where the buyers might start getting into trouble, because everyone that bought above yesterday's hammer candle will have been trapped. If so, where do you think the market will be heading to next? That's right, below levels where trap bulls stop loss orders would be resting. So namely this level here, which is at 128.55. And what I want to see then is if we break through that level, do we hold below it, or does the market create a false break there? If we hold below, then the next most likely scenario is for the cable to drop and take out further support levels, such as this region here, where we have the 200-day moving average converging with the 38.2 Fib and prior low at around 126.75. So that could be the next big downside target. And so far as the bullish scenario is concerned, if we go back above the 130 handle, I think that would be short-term bullish. If we close above it, then after the outcome of the election is known, we need to take out this bearish trend line that has been in place since early September. So if we take that bearish trend line out, I think that would be a bullish development for this pair. And then we could see in the days that followed the election, we could see a nice continuation higher, possibly towards this year's earlier highs. So yeah, there you have it, guys. I have those three markets prepared, and I'm going to hand it back over to Victor. And if you have any questions as well, I can't see any questions. Please feel free to ask. Back to you, Victor.
Yeah. So first of all, if there are any questions, indeed, we'll be happy to answer those. But in general, I wanted to once again be the voice of caution for all traders out there and warn you that anything can happen. So whatever convictions you might have, you better leave them, and just if you're feeling way too worried about what might happen, just sit this one out. Tomorrow is a better day, and what we can do is certainly be careful in these situations where we don't even have a certain outcome to predict.
Yeah, that's right. I totally agree with you there, Victor. You don't have to trade if the market is not giving you the right signals, and given the heightened uncertainty. But equally, there's times like now when volatility is quite high. Some traders thrive in these conditions. So it's all dependent on the type of trader you are. If you're comfortable trading high volatile times, maybe perhaps consider reducing your position size to compensate for sharper moves. But equally, if you see something that ticks all the boxes, don't hesitate just because we have the election. Perhaps you might want to take that trade, but then be quick to take profit at the first trouble area, and then move on to the next opportunity. So what I'm saying is, don't miss out on any opportunities, but equally be very careful not to get trapped in a trade that could go sharply against you. And to keep your emotions in check, I would suggest reducing your position size, possibly to half or even lower, just so that you are in the game, but at the same time, you're taking care of your emotion risks and other capital risks, etc. So yeah, Carl, are you still there? Do you have any?
Yes, no, I'm listening. No, it all makes sense. Yep.
Any further thoughts, or should we just wrap it up because we can't see any questions here?
No, I think I think we'll get a result sooner rather than later. I think the market. I think we'll be surprised by how quickly we get a result in this one this time around. I know it's a bold prediction, but I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah, and Trump will not go down without a fight. So
well, if it's a blowout, I don't think he'll have a choice. But if it's close in terms of those electoral college votes, that will give him scope to start to nitpick on some of those, contentious issues about counting and mail-ins.
yeah,
So we'll come down to the states, and if Biden is probably going to flip Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So, but they won't be called early. So that's the problem. The ones that will be called early, he just needs to snag. If he can snag Florida, I think he's a long way to getting there. So and we'll see over the next 24, 48 hours how the results go. And as it becomes more and more clear, it'll become less likely that Trump will have the ability to he'll talk, no doubt.
Definitely, yeah.
That's
More like he will tweet than talk. But I'm going to put you in the spot here, Carl. Who do you think is going to win?
No, I think Biden will win, and he'll win convincingly. As for the Senate, that will be a much closer race. Yeah. And even if he does get 51 or more, it will still be hard to get anything done in that US Congress. It's one of the most dysfunctional political systems on the planet. Of course, it's the model for everyone in the world, but it can be extremely dysfunctional.
And Victor, who's your money on?
Well, I have to say that I agree with Carl. I actually see a very different outcome to 2016, just because if you remember, guys, at the time, many people voted for Trump simply because he was not Hillary Clinton. And I think that this time around, many people will vote for Joe Biden simply because he's not Donald Trump.
That's a good point. Well made. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know, to be honest. I just don't want to. There's a part of me telling me not to rule out Trump because there are a lot of,
because we already ruled him once.
Yeah.
once.
So yeah, I don't know. It looks like it's going to be Biden, but never ever rule out Trump.
Yeah, he'll need a massive turnout on election day. So there's 100 million votes have already been cast. So
that's the
in
thing,
2016, 140 million votes were cast. So we're at 100 million. So that's 71% of votes, and we haven't even started yet, right? So most of the votes, and I saw as many as 45% of those who have voted early are registered Democrats. 30% are Republicans, and 24% have no affiliation. So that it's very much skewed. So that pre-vote is very much skewed towards Democrats. And therefore Trump will need a red army out there in the next few hours to have any chance.
Yeah, well, if he loses,
we will break records. Yeah, we'll break records in terms of voting.
And if you remember where the Red Army is coming from, it's certainly Russia.
Well done, Victor.
All right, on that bombshell, I think it's time to end this webinar. Yeah, and we let Carl get some sleep. What time is it there?
It is. It's 8:20 in the evening over here.
Okay, so it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
You're going to have the freshest view of the election results with fresh morning eyes.
Yes, it'll be good. I was on the local media today, and the media, there were lots of talking heads saying it's going to be very close. I was the only one that came out and said it's going to be a landslide. I felt that the rally today, I think the market was calling it today. The rally started in Asia, it's going through Europe. So that's just my opinion. But I'm one of the few people in the media today calling a clean result.
You are a brave man.
We'll see how we go. Yeah, I know. I think so.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I hope you found this useful. Please join us again in our webinar on Friday, which is a non-farm payrolls webinar preview. happens at 11:30 London time. And then next week, we will have our usual live market analysis webinar, which is on Tuesday, 11:30 London time. We'll have that webinar series every week, by the way. So join us then.
Thank you, guys, and have an uneventful evening.
Yes.
Just joking.
Thanks, Victor.
Cheers.
Thanks, Fawad. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.